As much as I'd like to make a fully objective video on DMC3, this video is not going to be that. I won't beat around the bush. Devil May Cry 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. This video is going to be littered with bias, because this game sparked a huge interest in action games for me. Devil May Cry 1 may have been my first game in the series, but 3 was what really hooked me. So yeah, take a lot of this with a grain of salt if you're a detractor, and if you're a fan, relish in the glaze. Devil May Cry 3 stormed onto the scene in 2005, and unlike Devil May Cry 1, which was developed by Team Little Devils, led by Hideki Kamiya, Devil May Cry 3 was developed by an in-house Capcom studio, Capcom Production Studio 1. Not a very exciting name. The director of the game was Hideaki Itsuno, who would go on to direct all subsequent Devil May Cry games, apart from DMC Devil May Cry. Hideaki Itsuno actually joined the team working on DMC during 2's development, but I'll cover that next time. Hideaki Itsuno has been a blessing for the franchise, creating timeless action games that remain some of my favorite games of all time, regardless of the genre. In my first Devil May Cry video, check it out if you haven't already, I took time to break down the gameplay loop. In 3, it's similar enough that I'm not going to take too much time on it. Start with a sword, use your sword to kill demons, fight a boss after that, acquire a new weapon from the boss, and use that new weapon with your sword to style on foes, the next boss, etc, till you make your way all the way up to the big man in blue. Now, there are a few big differences between DMC 1 and 3, but the first main difference I want to talk about here is going to be the style system. In DMC 3, along with your face buttons for jump, slash, and shoot, your fourth face button, or whatever you choose to map it to, is your style button, and the action changes based on your equipped style. There are 4 main styles: Trickster, Swordmaster, Gunslinger, and Royal Guard. First is Trickster, in which your style button becomes a dash. Your dash has iframes, or in other words, you're invincible when you use it, similar to your jump and your roll. So, Trickster helps you dodge more good. With Swordmaster, your style button becomes a new attack, which is based on your weapon. Your new attack will help you to extend combos. So, Swordmaster helps you slash more good. Now with Gunslinger, your style button becomes a shoot move. Your shoot move is going to make your guns better and also help to extend your combos. So, Gunslinger helps you shoot more good. And lastly, Royal Guard. Your style button becomes a block move. Your block move will become a parry move if timed right and released right. So, Royal Guard helps you block more good. Now, I do want to mention, despite playing way too much Devil May Cry 3, I've mostly used Swordmaster and Trickster for my playthroughs, and actually had to look up some of the details about Gunslinger's level ups, proving just how good this game is and how much there is to explore. That, or there's an oddly antagonist-shaped thing in this game that I haven't yet talked about, that gets most of my game time on replays. But who knows? With that in mind, before a mission, and also at divinity statues in the middle of missions, you can change which style you have equipped. Each style has 3 levels to it, which rank up with experience gained from defeating enemies. There's a little meter up by the health and devil trigger bars to help you keep track, but it's not a direct plus 20 experience points pop-up type of situation. Each level unlocks new moves related to the style meter. For example, Trickster's level 1 is 1 ground dash, 2 is an air dash and 2 consecutive ground dashes, and 3 is a teleport and 3 consecutive ground dashes. Definitely experiment, although I will say that I'd probably recommend Trickster for a first playthrough, especially if you're not used to action games, as having a definitive dodge button can help with getting used to the staying in enemies' faces and hacking them to death gameplay style. If you're used to action games, maybe you've played DMC 1, Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, or even some adjacent Soul stuff, I would argue Trickster isn't as essential. That's not to say Trickster is a beginner or baby style, of course. If I'm starting a 100% fresh playthrough, I like to alternate between Trickster and Swordmaster. But I try to get Trickster to at least level 2 for that air dash, if not 3 for the teleport, making it my main style. In later games of the series, styles become switchable during gameplay, allowing for even crazier skill expression through combat. In the most accessible version of DMC3, from the HD collection, styles can only be equipped one at a time. However, the most definitive version of Devil May Cry 3 is actually the Switch version. In this version, the style system works like later games, letting you swap between the 4 main styles seamlessly during gameplay using the D-pad, or D-buttons, goofy Switch controller. There are mods for the HD collection on PC that allow style switching as well, but I haven't messed with those, because I have the Switch version in addition to the HD collection. I know, I'm spoiled. For this video, I played the HD collection version because it is so much more accessible, and if you're a newcomer, it's more than likely the version that you're going to end up playing. The next biggest change coming into DMC3 are the weapons. There are far more weapons to obtain in the game compared to DMC1, I'll get to you. And thus, there was a limitation on how many could be equipped. In the HD collection and the original, you can equip 2 guns and 2 devil arms at one time. This can be done before a mission, and once again at divinity statues during a mission. Each devil arm has its own set of new or upgraded moves to unlock, and each gun's power can be upgraded, both with red orbs. Once more, the Switch version is the definitive in this regard, allowing you to swap between all weapons during gameplay, rather than just selecting a couple for a mission. It's come up a couple times now, so I'll address the elephant in the room. That is, which version should you play? I've talked about the main differences, but one more difference the Switch version makes that's worth mentioning is co-op Bloody Palace. In DMC3, starting with the Special Edition release, Bloody Palace is a mode in which you fight waves of enemies and bosses, climbing up a tower to reach the top as it gets progressively harder. In DMC3, there are 9,999 levels to the Bloody Palace. In full disclosure, I have not beaten it. I've messed around with it a couple times, but I've never gotten too high. In the Switch version, you can tackle the Bloody Palace mode with 2 players instead of just 1. Now, if this, as well as the seamless style and weapon switching, sound interesting or more fun, and you also have a Switch, then the Switch version may be for you. However, my biggest argument against the Switch version, which is not to say that you shouldn't buy it, because I definitely did, is that without a sale, it's $20, and on sale, it's $10. The HD collection, at least on Steam, is $30 without a sale, and goes on sale regularly for $10. Assuming you buy these games on sale, because, let's be real, that's the economy we're living in, and it's just a smart decision. It's base DMC3 Special Edition in addition to DMC1, which I think is goated, and 2, which is still worth trying, versus just DMC3 Special Edition with some quality of life changes and a co-op mode. 3 games versus 1. So in my humble opinion, I would recommend that you just buy the HD collection, especially if you've never played DMC games, because you're getting more bang for your buck. Also, you can totally mod the HD collection version of DMC3 Special Edition to have style and weapon switching, in addition to much more. But that's just my 2 cents on the matter. With all the differences between DMC1 and DMC3 out of the way, as well as version differences between the Switch and the HD collection, let's talk story and characters. I'm going to start with no spoilers, and then I'll make it clear when I'm ready to talk spoilers with timestamps, so you can skip ahead. The DMC3's story focuses on 4 main characters: Dante, Lady, Virgil, and Arkham. In Mission 1, Dante is visited by Arkham with a message from Virgil, goading him into coming to Temen-Negru, the giant demonic tower that the two summon. Virgil seems interested in Dante's amulet necklace at this point, but the exact reason is not going to be revealed until later. Dante's going to stop some potential evil villainy that may be afoot. He begins to ascend the tower and meets Lady, a woman who is hunting Arkham because he killed her mother. The two don't get along too well and continue to ascend their separate ways. Dante will clash with hella demons and bosses before eventually reaching Virgil, where the two twins duke it out in a battle for the ages. Now we have to get into the spoiler zone to talk more on the story. Skip ahead to this time if you haven't played DMC3 yet and don't want to be spoiled, and I do recommend playing through the game blind if you can, even if the story itself isn't necessarily the craziest. Okay, ready? The story might not be revolutionary, but let's face it, the character writing in DMC3 is gas, straight fire, hot off the stove. There's a reason why Virgil Battle 2 was the username I picked for my Twitch and YouTube accounts. The power differential between Dante and Virgil is conveyed so well through things like Virgil taking out enemies that you may have struggled on with ease. Beowulf is the biggest example here, but even the Hell Vanguard in Mission 2. Of course, on replay, I don't think his fights 100% do it justice, with his first fight being super easy and his second also being relatively easier, but on the first playthrough, Virgil can whoop your butt. While Nightmare in DMC1 was the first boss I remember genuinely struggling with in a video game, Virgil's second fight was the first boss I remember genuinely having to learn and pay attention to. The fire bosses were tough, and Beowulf just before is no slouch, but nothing beats that holy shit moment of Virgil activating his own devil trigger and regaining health just like you. That shit is peak, and even if it wasn't too much of a struggle on this run, I still had to try a couple of times before getting it down and beating him. In the third fight, I replay these games on normal difficulty to try and get as close to a new player perspective as I can for these videos, and it still took me like 4 tries to beat Virgil's third battle. Granted, it's been a couple of years since I last played it, but still, he's no slouch, and it only helps build up how awesome he is, and build up hype for when you unlock him as a playable character. Yeah, that's right, Virgil is playable for the first time in the series, and it will stay. Now, when I say I've played countless hours of DMC3, what I mean is that I've played through DMC3 a good few times as Dante, at least one normal run per platform and an occasional hard run here and there, and 1 billion Virgil hours. If Dante is a Swiss Army knife that can cater to a few different action playstyles, Virgil is, fittingly, a really sharp katana that's really good at one playstyle, but is primarily played just that one way. Maybe it's just the tism in my brain, and this will come up when I talk about the other games that Virgil's playable in, which, you know, is most of them going forward. But doing one thing really good, just quickly eliminating enemies using Virgil's skill set, tickles my brain in all the right ways. There are ways to be stylish on Virgil, and he even has his own style to level up and 3 weapons to use, but the narrower options when playing him just let me hone in on them in such a satisfying way. DMC3 and subsequent entries also do a good job by making him really fucking strong. This isn't some nerfed final boss being unlocked. You are genuinely playing Virgil Devil May Cry. The only nerf I would mention is that you can't get your super moves, like the screen-wide judgment cuts or the endless Helmbreakers from his 3rd battle, which is probably for the best in this game. My favorite part of playing Virgil is Beowulf's moveset. Beowulf is a weapon that both Dante and Virgil get to use, so I wouldn't have faulted the developers for just copy-pasting the moveset between them. But they don't. Virgil gets different moves that feel different to play. When I did my run as Dante for this video, I was confused for a second when I whipped out Beowulf, and I couldn't figure out why Starfall felt off or why I couldn't Lunar Phase, before I remembered that the team that worked on it are just the goats, and I was just so used to playing Virgil that I'd forgotten the 2 characters had different movesets on the same weapon. Seriously, they knocked it out of the park. But hey, I'm done gushing about Virgil for now. Moving on to other characters, Lady in Arkham's story in this game is awesome. I like the revenge angle where she wants to kill her demonic father for sacrificing her mom. I like when he gets cornered and acts like Virgil possessed or controlled him into doing these horrible things. I like when Lady briefly confronts Virgil about this, and he alludes that Arkham's lying and doesn't outright say it. As corny as Jester is, I like him too, as an alternate persona for Arkham so that he can work from the shadows to bring everyone together for his own evil plan. And I like that Arkham's plan does backfire due to the twins, and he dies a pathetic death. But it's still emotional, because he's still Lady's father. She had to kill her own dad and confront that he sacrificed her mother for this bid for power that ended up in shambles. It's campy, but it hits all the right emotional notes to make it heartbreaking at the same time, and if that doesn't sum up DMC stories, I don't know what else will. Genuinely, all of the main characters are a joy, and that's not even getting into the interactions that Dante has with the sentient bosses in this game. Alright, spoilers are over, but I'm going to do a quick bit. The non-spoiler folks are going to skip here, and I'm going to say something really dumb to try and make them laugh, okay? 3, 2, 1. And then he Dante'd all over them, and the devil cried. The end. Now, with story and characters out of the way, let's talk enemies and bosses. Having fun and interesting player mechanics is all well and good, but if what you're fighting doesn't keep you on your toes, is it really good combat? Luckily, DMC3 delivers. I will put it out there right out of the gate. I think the game suffers from a weaker second half in terms of enemies, and I don't think that's an entirely unpopular opinion. But apart from some annoyances, I don't think it majorly hinders the experience. The enemies in the first half of the game are typically humanoid or humanoid adjacent, and as the game goes on and you get closer to the demon realm, this starts to change. Now, the designs, they're all awesome, no complaints there. But I would rather go through 1,000 excruciating years of being a slave to Mundus than fight another room of the Fallen. The fuckers wouldn't be too bad, except that they fly around constantly and they go into walls or the floor, so you cannot hit them. Other late game enemies like the Arachne and the Dullahan aren't bad per se, but not as fun to fight in my opinion. We're not talking like second half of Dark Souls 1 levels of drop off in quality, but I'd argue that it's pretty noticeable on a playthrough. I'm tempted to say the bosses follow a similar pattern, but really, I think it's just a couple of stinkers towards the end, and let's be honest, there are a couple of stinkers in the first half too. If you find me one person that's excited to fight either Gigapede or Leviathan in a playthrough, I will actually be impressed. The upside of DMC3's bosses is that while the lows can be moderately low, mostly just kind of boring, the highs are very high. Cerberus, Agni and Rudra, Beowulf, 3 of the goats. There's a reason why they're remembered so fondly 21 years later. Damn! Not only are the fights themselves fun, but the cutscenes before and after are like bottled joy. Nothing beats the scenes where Dante whips out ridiculous, stylish moves when acquiring a new weapon. Honestly, it's no secret that outside of weapon bosses, the other bosses are weaker. That is, except for Virgil. I gushed about him in the spoilers section, but Virgil's boss fights are some of the most memorable in all my time of gaming. If Virgil's first fight acts as a test of the basics, his second acts as a mastery check to ensure that you've adequately interacted with the systems to make it to the end, and the third fight just turns it up to 11 in an epic finale. I ranked the bosses for DMC1 in the last video, so here I'm going to put up my ranking for the bosses in DMC3. Well, that's pretty much the game. I'm not going to include an overt "what do I think" section, because in this case, I think it's pretty clear that I love the game. It was super influential towards my taste in gaming, and I've talked about it before on stream, but if it wasn't for the Devil May Cry series, and ultimately, DMC3, for hooking me so hard, I probably would have given up gaming as a hobby. This video served as an awesome excuse to boot the game up again and give it a whirl, something that I was doing regularly for years after I first played through the series. 3 is my most played DMC game, and for good reason. I love young Dante, I love Virgil as a main antagonist, and Lady and Arkham serve as great supporting cast members, all wrapped up in the awesome aesthetic of Tem and Negrum. This is all the bow on top of the amazing present that is DMC3's combat system, one that remains timelessly engaging even after the release of more refined sequels and contemporaries. Do I think you'll like the game? Well, if you're down to clown with an action game that's a little tougher than your average video game, then absolutely yes. Even if you don't normally play action games, I think that if you can make it past Cerberus, you'll be a-okay. You might struggle and have to retry bosses. I mean, it took me way too long to beat the final boss on my first playthrough, and even then, I'm pretty sure I used a gold orb I saved just to get that revive so I didn't have to restart. But as long as you're willing to put in the time and effort, you've got one of the most influential and overall one of my favorite action games of all time on your hands. DMC1 is the progenitor, but DMC3's improvements on the formula walked so that games like Bayonetta and Metal Gear Rising could run, not excluding other influential games of the time like Ninja Gaiden and God of War. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you all so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end. I'm just doing this as a fun little hobby, so it really means a lot that anyone is tuning in to see what I think about one of my favorite series. Last time, I encouraged you all to leave comments talking about your thoughts and experiences with DMC1, and I love the small conversations about it that we got to have, so I encourage you all to do the same again. Next time, I plan on giving my thoughts on Devil May Cry 2, a game that, admittedly, I've never finished. The last thing I remember is this underwater boss that kind of annoyed me, or the living chopper boss fight, whichever was later. So, while the game's reputation is notable, to say the least, I'm still excited to give it a real try. But hey, you know I gotta say it. If you haven't already, smash that like button, and maybe hit subscribe if you like my content. And check out my DMC1 video if you haven't already. Now have an awesome rest of your day. Peace.